Hi, welcome to Holy Raw in its audio format so that you have a chance to, listen to it instead of reading it if that's your jam. So, welcome to the fire that shapes its own timeline. You are the altar. You are the authority. The divine isn't somewhere else looking in, it's actually what you're made of. Today's moon reaches its exact last quarter at 8:21 Mountain Time. And on the tropical wheel, it's in Taurus. Feet on the ground. In the actual constellation, though, behind it is still in Aries. While, these two wheels, they don't match up because of the precession of the equinoxes. The Earth's own slow wobble that's been quietly, shifting the sky out from under the tropical system for around 2,000 years now, moving the actual constellations behind wherever a sign was originally named. Now, neither of these are wrong, right? Neither of them are right either, because they're the same frequency, and the wheels still speak the same language, but their frequencies represent something more. This is the way that I see it, right? The tropical wheel represents the self. The constellational wheel represents the soul. Tonight, they're being asked to have a conversation, to ground and fire, with ground and fire close enough to actually talk to each other instead of just passing by. This happens, all the time. The whatever constellation is with the moon is not usually aligned up with the actual alignment or with the actual tropical zodiac. They're about 2.5 days off. Sometimes they meet, sometimes they don't. But right, Taurus here. So the language here, the star speak here is the Taurus is Earth. It's the fixed. It's not interested in moving until it's actually ready. And it's super concerned with what's real enough to keep the body, what you can actually build a life around instead of what just feels exciting for a minute. That's the self tonight, asking you to really slow down long enough to find what's actually worth keeping. The old stories carry that same weight though, right? In Greek myth, the bull is Zeus himself in disguise. Gentle enough that Europa climbed onto his back without fear. And he carried her across the sea to Crete, where she became a queen and the mother of a whole new lineage. Definitely something to Google if you're interested in the myths and the language and how this works with the psyche. Now in Egypt, it's Apis, the sacred bull kept at Memphis, believed to be the living body of God Ptah, walking around on earth, worshipped as the god itself, not just a symbol of one. Whatever tradition you pull it from, the bull was not ever just an animal either. It was already a body a god was willing to actually live inside of. Underneath all of that, though, the actual constellation behind tonight's moon is under Aries. Once again, so like that soul level, the primal fire that acts on instinct before reasoning. It's the same charge old traditions gave this constellation too. A golden ram sacrificed in Greek myth so 2 children could live. A ram-headed god shaping human bodies out of clay in Egypt and breathing life into them. The soul, hasn't slowed down even while the self is asking to. When the 2 layers land somewhere different like this, which is more often than not, that's not 2 things at odds. It's like we were never actually separate. Not the fire and not the ground it's standing on. They're not separate. There's still a double fire running though through tonight. The soul's Aries burning underneath and the sun itself blazing through Leo the whole time, building towards the total solar eclipse landing exactly there on August 12th. Leo's rulership goes deeper than, pop culture, astrology, and what we've kind of learned to see it as and what we've been taught. Older traditions treated it as the fire of divine will instead of personal ego. It's the animating spark that actually gives you the authority to shape your own timeline. That's why the realist version of this sign was never super loud. It's not boisterous. It's actual, its presence is magnetic. It radiates direction instead of demanding it. Right? Important. The surface level is about being seen, but it's about aligning our outer actions with our inner sun, which allows you to truly be seen from your own soul's divine architecture, and that creates magnetism. The most important ingredient for real manifestation is understanding where our magnetism, where our magnetic self sits. Jupiter is still sitting in the same fire too. The exact conjunction it had with the sun at the full moon has widened to about 5 degrees now, but it hasn't left. And neither has what it opened, the invitation to actually let your own light be seen instead of managed. The nodes shifted into the same Leo-Aquarius axis right before the full moon. South node sitting in Leo specifically, and what's actually being released there is the performing for approval version of this fire, not the fire itself. Now, maybe you know this, but I love myths, and I feel like it speaks to our soul in a way that just words just can't. So Egypt has a fiercer edge of that same fire, which is Sekhmet, the lioness who burned through corruption. Some still say, right? I believe this too, that Leo season awakens her codes. The fire that purifies instead of destroys if we let it burn clean. Sovereign instead of performative. Never really the spotlight. It's what supports the spotlight, right? It's the throne that stands behind it. Now, you carry into the eclipse whatever doesn't get set down first. And I don't say this in a scary way, right? That's just what this whole preparation window is actually for. Eclipses bring the unconscious up on purpose. That's why it feels fated. The fears, the things we've been managing instead of facing. And if I had to name the one piece of programming sitting underneath most of what surfaces, it's the fear of separation itself. The fear that we're actually cut off from the divine, from each other, and from our own power. When that fear gets faced, instead of just managed, this eclipse window becomes the thing that brings our own past actions up to speed with where we're actually going, not just on a personal level, but collectively too, and obviously on the soul level as well. Destiny was never sitting out there, somewhere waiting to happen to us. It's our own momentum finally catching up with itself. So here we go. Get ready to actually work with this. With the whole eclipse window, and the way in is the same remembrance running through everything else here, that you are the altar. When that actually integrates, when that idea, that remembrance actually integrates, that's the power that radiates direction. That's the authority to shape your own timeline. And that's what, I might call like a magnificent manifester actually looks like inside this window and all the time, but not the passive version most people have been taught, wishing something into existence and waiting for it to arrive, but the one who takes that willful action, who actually imbues it, injects it directly into their life, instead of asking the universe to deliver it fully formed. Because the truth is, we are constantly manifesting. Magnetism is the actual ingredient in whether it works from alignment or against it. Present, though, no matter what, it's present. It never turns off. So maybe the real question is always what you're pulling in and what you're sending out through it at once. The same reciprocity. They're not two separate things. Whatever isn't your true self, whatever's still carrying the separation programming, is exactly what gets broadcast, whether you mean to or not, which is why, right? We sacrifice those parts on the altar in the first place, and why that brings us right back to the altar itself, to being the conduit, to what this whole post is actually about. So here it is. You are not separate from the divine. Call it creator, if that's your word. Excuse me. Call it goddess, God, the universe, whatever name works for you. You are not separate from it either way. No mediator required between the two of you. Waiting for permission to access it, waiting for the right teacher, the right plant, the right ceremony, the right lineage, class, course to finally let you in. You are not a container that gets filled up with sacredness from somewhere else if you do enough work, right? There's no divine standing outside you, watching, deciding when you're worthy enough to receive a little. You are the altar itself. You are not standing near the sacred thing. You are actually what it's made of. Now, I have to speak to, that altars have carried the energy of sacrifice for most of history. Something given, something burned, something laid down in exchange for a favor. And I'm not erasing that. I'm revisioning what that meant. Because even that old model was already circling the same spiritual axiom running through this whole piece. The vibration underneath it. It's the above is of the below, and the below is of the above. It's one current. It's not a mirror. The old story said you give something to a divine you believe is separate from you, something you have to earn to access it, but that's not actually what made those practices powerful. This is my belief. It was that the same current moving both ways at once. It's not a payment, right, made upward to earn something back down. The offerings themselves can be seen as a representation of the internal world. So we still work with altars. Some of us still work with altars this way. But the actual work happening inside a person, given a physical form, so it could be witnessed and actually moved. An altar isn't just a space for receiving, it's a tuning fork. Something built to resonate at the frequency of what's true. So whatever's inside you can find that same pitch and align with it and answer it. So, maybe the true sacrifice altars have actually carried this whole time isn't the burnt offering. It's the parts of you that were never your true self. Never your harnessed electromagnetic frequency. The parts built entirely out of society's programming, right? That leave the soul shattered and fragmented in the belief that you are separate in the first place. That's what actually gets laid down, not something given to earn favor from a divine somewhere else. The false self itself, the part carrying the separation, the idea of separation, is released so that what's actually true, natural law, can move without it in the way. And here's, the part that took me really a long time to fully understand, because it does sound like a contradiction, but it isn't. Knowing you are made of the divine is exactly what lets you become an instrument for it. Not, emptied out, not erased, not a hollow tube for an outside force to push through you, but actually a collaboration instead. The above and the below feeding each other. You setting down that, the small, I'm the one doing this, quote unquote, so that something can move with you, as you. You don't disappear to make room for the divine. You remember you are already it. And then you get to work in co-creation with it. That's the whole thing, really. Not separate, never were. And that story of separation doesn't stop with the divine either. We're not separate from each other. And the willful fire that wants to move through you this eclipse season also was never separate from the altar that you already are. The sovereignty and the surrender were always the same current, not two things, taking turns. So back on the full moon, I wrote about the practice of watching a thought instead of becoming it. And there's a version of that same thing running through this too, right? If that's ever been a useful practice for you, the part doing the watching was never actually lost inside what it was watching. So how could it have ever been separate from what it's made of? So here's the invitation. Let the self ground the soul's fire, and let the sun show that fire what it's actually here to do. The bull, the ram, the lion, none of it was ever separate. It's one current wearing three different myths, three different names, three different stories, but you are what holds all of it. You are the altar. The divine isn't somewhere else looking in. It's what you are made of. Happy pre-eclipse window, pre-eclipse portal.